Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the ReluTech Podcast. I'm very happy today to welcome Bimal Tandel to the podcast. He is from NuVista AI. He's the CEO over there. He actually has a long history working here with ReluTech on a variety of projects, as well as with our founder on a variety of other things in the past. So really glad to have you on, Bimal.
Thank you. Yeah, very excited to be on your podcast. I have heard many of them, and I really enjoy your conversational style. So excited to be on. Thank you so much.
And I think it's going to be a cool conversation today. You know, since AI has become a popular topic, we've had a few different podcasts that have started to dig into how that's being used in a few different areas. This is one that's pretty relevant to our business model, to a lot of the companies that we partner with business model. As you can tell from the company he works with, there's an emphasis on AI. And AI has a strong ability to potentially impact the consulting industry. I think we're already seeing a lot of that happen, but just kind of to set the stage a little bit, we'll dig a little more into consulting, like as a business first, for maybe some people who aren't sitting directly in the consulting business, they can understand, I guess, where AI kind of starts to fit into all this. So let's talk about the traditional role of consulting. So Bimal, you've worked in consulting for a while.
Yes.
And in your experience there, typically, how's the traditional process of consulting work, whether it be the people, the technology, and again, I guess the processes that come in place to make all of this run?
Yes, yeah. So consulting, of course, has a long history, and there have been various kinds. We have the large SIs to the boutiques. Essentially, in consulting, you're solving three different problems: the people problem, the process problem, and the technology problem. And the early age of consulting, all three of these were separate companies. There were companies focused on supply chain process consulting, for example. They didn't care what the technology was. They helped companies solve supply chain problems using, their people, various technologies, all of that. We saw consulting kind of evolve and get, pressurized to where every company had to solve all three problems together. Like, if you look at large SI like Accenture or other consulting, they have teams that actually do AWS consulting. Like there are teams that do GCP consulting because most of the buyers understand that you want to work with consulting companies that bring people, process, technology, all of them together to solve the problem, right? And that has always been the traditional role of consulting. The pressure on consulting has always been there, but now what AI is doing is changing the way the script has been told, right? So before, when we did traditional consulting, we led with people. But now more and more what we're going to see is, consulting companies would have to lead with AI. And, we can talk in detail about, what that looks like. But, traditional consulting has always been about solving people, process, and technology together. But with AI, it's going to get disrupted.
Yeah, and I mean, the way you kind of structure there, it starts with people. So whether it be the people at the consulting company or people internally at the customer that the consultant is serving, the people have to be in place for you to then implement good processes. And then the
Yes.
technology is obviously to support and add efficiency and effectiveness to those good processes, right, with the people in place. So you're right, there was an order to these things, but AI does come in and it creates an agility that previously didn't exist. So kind of getting into that, what are some of the first, I guess, areas that AI started to disrupt, I guess, as far as consulting goes? Like you mentioned, it's starting in that kind of people area. How's that going?
Sure. So of course, obviously, AI, even with the, the current form of AI that we have seen with ChatGPT, kind of exposing the whole generative AI, which really added acceleration to consulting. Consultants have always been better at absorbing this cost pressure all the time and using that disruption to be agile. Like, we always had accelerators and now AI is just accelerating that. So the cost has been passed on to the customers, and companies and consultants have been using AI. But really, where the flip is going to be disruptive is that instead of leading with people, right? So like, when somebody calls me and says, Bimal, I have a problem, I have to send a smart person first, right? Like I have to send that person, do the workshop, understand the customer
The
problem.
discovery phase, right? It's the classic thing of any consulting project. You start with discovery, and that can be something that happens before this is even a paying customer, depending on the complexity. And it can be something that you actually get paid to do, just to discover, right?
Just to discover, put the process together, kind of bring the technology. And, of course, in all of this process, AI was used, right? I've been using AI, for like the generative AI for since its inception. But even before that, there were a lot of accelerators that we would use in Google Workspaces or Microsoft Suites. Those accelerators were always available. So before, what would take 4 or 5 people, we could bring that down and reduce the amount of overhead, right? With AI, that's just accelerated, right? So AI is an accelerator which today consultants do use. But the shift that I'm talking about is that instead of having a smart person be the first interaction with the customer, more and more customers are going to expect to talk to your AI first, right? If I have a problem, I want the experience to be an AI driven experience where I'm able to actually streamline my thoughts, right? I'm able to put my problem statements together, and I'm able to kind of even get estimates from AI, right? And that integration of AI first and technology first, integrated with the process, and is basically going to result in a situation where where humans are more of an augmenters of the consulting process than the leaders of the consulting process, right? So I call it human augmented consulting, which is where I think we are going, versus human-led consulting, which is where you bring AI in your back pocket, right? Versus leading.
Well, I think like the way you're describing that, because what I'm seeing here, so we talked about you have to get a really smart person to start that discovery, right? And AI can obviously come in and be a very smart person. But the other thing is the breadth of knowledge that AI can bring because of how much data it can be connected to. While the smart person can be left to maybe focus on more problem-solving type tasks once there have been more of this deep discovery done by AI that can focus on some key points but have all the data pulled right in front of them. Again, it's going to be time utility. If you worked around consulting, most of these folks don't exactly have tons of free time. It's a pretty busy schedule already, and to be able to make them focus on the problem and how it's actually working with the customer, right? Because the customer starts with AI, but then they're really trying to implement things, and they're going to have to talk about how it makes them feel and how things are going, how their internal people and processes work. There's still a lot more nuanced things that come in where you might want a human being to really be able to see it through. So it's interesting because I think some of their area, there's a lot of obviously AI concern of replacement, right? There's also the other side of it, which is acceleration, augmentation, those types of things. So I guess, do you see this as something where it's both of these are going to be happening, one or the other? How do you see that shaking out, whether it be replacement versus acceleration?
Yeah. So with disruption, there are always some impact, right? So there is going to be disruption, but I definitely do not believe in the AI replacing consultant mindset, right? I also don't think it's in the middle where I definitely think AI is a value add to consulting. In fact, my prediction is that once this AI disruption is settled in, the actual dollar per hour rates that we charge for that human consulting will actually go up and not go down, because you will be able to deliver higher value at a lower cost, right? I would be more efficient with my time. I would be able to handle more customer situations at a time. And those efficiencies would result in from a consultant perspective, a higher dollar per hour rate. So I definitely think it's going to be a positive from a revenue generator and an accelerator and a customer impact perspective. Now, it will mean that the size of the contracts will get smaller because customers would expect more value for the total size of the contract that they are spending, right? Contracts will become more agile. We will not see these long multi-million-dollar contracts. I think they will get disrupted. So essentially, when AI disrupts it and when AI becomes a front end of the consulting, customers would happily pay more for dollar per hour for agile consulting and be very comfortable working with multiple vendors, because AI would solve the complexity of that friction that typically happens when you have multiple vendors working together. So which is what led customers to give large contracts to one company, because they didn't want to deal with the friction of multiple companies, multiple process. But when AI becomes the owner of the process and the owner of the buying cycle, you will see companies buying small consulting with with many companies versus one large consulting with one, right? So I think it's disruptive. It is, and always disruption leads to smaller agile companies benefiting more. Large, like I think there are SIs that have more than 100, 200,000 employees, right? They will definitely be disrupted, and they'll have to figure out how to take advantage of the disruption versus be disrupted. So we'll have to see who the winners and losers are in this market, but it will be a net positive to the consulting business.
Well, yeah, and I think because we've used the word disrupt, and I actually did a product management like meetup years ago where it was an interesting conversation about what is really disruption, because a lot of people want to say this is something is disruptive, but it's really important that a disruptive thing, if in a tech disruptor, it starts in like the lower markets especially, and that's where it makes them more competitive, basically. So like Uber disrupted because it went for the really cheap, affordable customer. And that's some of the things like with a small consulting shop, right? These niche shops maybe that focus on really specific problems. Hiring can be really difficult. They have to compete with large consulting firms that do hire these large staffs and pay them really well, job stability, benefits, all those types of things. And it makes it so to be competitive, they have to use any tool available. And this can be huge for companies like that to really kind of take over their niches, develop their models to their respective needs, their customers' needs. I think that it is going to be disruptive in that truly definitive sense of disruption like Uber did, as opposed to other brands like, for instance, Tesla, that started off going for top tier customers, luxury, and then they moved down to things like the Model 3. So you kind of have a different approach where it's not really disruption in that standpoint.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think in both those cases, it depends how expensive it is to disrupt a large market, right? I mean, actually, it's very interesting. Uber also started with the luxury market, and they quickly realized that they actually had to start
because they had the black. It was like a limousine type service, and they were like, I mean, it just really wasn't getting any traction that they needed, and they knew they had to shift quick. And where they gained their traction was when they chose, let's disrupt, let's take all this business from taxis.
Yes. So but I think AI definitely I see starting more on the Uber side of the disruption, where it will disrupt on the starting at a mass scale. It doesn't have to remain niche, right? I see that happening. I also, like, if you talked about like the doomsday or the negative prediction of AI, right? I kind of see that right now in the market. Microsoft just laid off like 9,000 people. I mean, add that. I mean, we are seeing the efficiency of AI impact people, but I very optimistically believe that once those optimizations are settled in, we will actually see next year and the year after a lot of out of college graduates being hired, right? Because
it's also complicated why the layoffs are happening, right? Because it's not all because of AI. I know that sometimes, and admittedly with big companies who have a public image, they don't want to say that we hired too many people. And we were doing this during COVID when everyone was really excited about the benefits of the technology industry. We hired a ton of people at not competitive market rates. Yes. And then eventually we had to reckon with what we've done there. And I think that it's better to say we are becoming so efficient with AI that we don't need all these people anymore. I'm like, no, you actually never needed all those people. I think that's actually what happened.
I think there is some marketing to it. I think it's I think they want to say that AI is the reason so that it appears like they're on the front end of the technology. I kind of see that it's the speculation should exist. We should be questioning.
It's certainly happening, but I also think we're seeing like these huge layoffs of the big companies. But I do see with a lot of smaller shops that are at least profitable and stable businesses, maybe not ones that are like pre-profit that already have that natural instability. But profitable, stable businesses aren't having layoffs quite like the really big companies right now, which is interesting.
So the way I look at it is, as like I said, and optimistically, I believe it is a net positive, because if you look at it, what's going to happen is people who are experienced are becoming more efficient, right? So for example, I would do like 1 or 2 workshop in a month when I was kind of full time on field doing innovation advisory work. I think I can do 1 every week, right? Because AI would make me very efficient. So to the experienced class, AI is going to become an accelerator. But it is also going to do is going to accelerate the need to hire junior talent, right? Like actually companies are going to do more of that. And I know today in the market, it is not happening. Like, students are having hard time, being hired. But once the efficiencies of AI is settled in, it's going to be easier to hire people out of school because you have this process and intelligence built in your AI. So it'll actually be easier to get the junior talent hired and be able to deliver that value to the customer quickly, right?
Well,
Like,
there will always be academic institutions that really try to like advance this craft, and obviously it'll make people who've gained this type of experience very valuable. I do think, again, we have a momentary disruption in people who maybe were trying to become a junior in traditional consulting, and that is evaporating. It really is, because a lot of these junior roles would occupy maybe that discovery area, a business analyst, for instance, that AI is really going to eat into. But I think that, like you mentioned, there's going to be a shift in what these young people are going to be needed for at these companies, and there's going to be a lot of need for them. But I do think there is that very fair concern about the junior people who are looking at a traditional consulting path. Now, that said, I think there's also another reason that graduates are having a tough time right now getting a job, and it's because the job market, like you said, people are getting laid off at huge companies that were doing lots of hiring in the past, especially junior folks. And we've seen this happen in other economic cycles. You know, in 2008, 2009, the people coming right out of college, that was a super hard time to be trying to get a job right out of college because you had no experience. And everyone were like, I need to hire someone who's going to be profitable, who comes in, makes an impact, and helps us survive this tough economic climate. So I think there's a lot of factors that are playing against some of the young folks right now. AI is a contributor in some ways, but I think it also has some potential to open doors for them, because as much as I like to believe I'm staying tech savvy as I get older, everyone who knows anything about technology knows young people can do unbelievable stuff with it. It's constant. It is a constant truth.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, nobody here has 5 years of generative AI experience, right? So if the technology
it hasn't been around for 5 years, really. And the young people, it's one of those things where it's when people are so young, right? They have all this energy, and I read a lot of random articles, and about when a brain develops, like one of the first things developed is your ability to actually solve problems really well. But you don't necessarily think about consequences till later. That's the maturity factor that maybe young people don't have. But by the time people are teenagers, they're pretty smart. They have the ability to learn really quickly at those ages. And I mean, faster than I would be able to learn these things. So it makes them competitive with these new technologies in a way that, as much as, again, us old folks want to believe we can keep up with them, I don't know if you ever try to stay up late with young folks. I can't do it.
Yeah. And what I'm talking about from like I said, once the AI disruption is settled in, and most of these consulting companies get better at leading with AI, what I'm saying is that that junior consultants would be able to deliver higher value to the customer, right? Because of AI, right? So because you needed, experienced consultant, because you needed somebody to have that experience, that empathy, be able to break down a smaller problem, like a large problem, into smaller tasks. Like from that experience, they know what's going to work, what's not going to work, and they bring the junior talent, to come execute, right? Now what we're seeing right now is, AI is being able to kind of execute some of those tasks on some of the less complex level. But you're always going to need at the end a human augmentation. And what I'm saying is that once the AI disruption is settled in, the junior consultants would also have a higher value to customers, right? And they would actually be able to lead with AI and deliver a higher value. So all the layers of consultants are going to benefit from it, right?
I think they're going to be learning to actually deliver consulting in collaboration with AI, like that. They're the ones who are actually, that's how their career's starting. This is the path they've been on. And I think for a lot of people, they're having to change to this, right? They have a preconceived notion of things, and this is now the new notion. Again, that is an advantage for young people in this change. They will be coming out of college having, for many of them at some more advanced institutions, working with advanced AI models in college, understanding how these things can be utilized in unique ways, and having the soft human skills to be able to deliver that in a consulting format.
There is one more, AI, I call it the boomerang effect, right? We are seeing, a lot of AI come in and a lot of predictions about, how many different skill set it's going to replace. I think there will definitely be in the upcoming years, like a boomerang effect that we had when, remember, the call centers went all AI, and as soon as an AI call center picked up, you're like, how do I talk to a human, right? We're going to see
also self-checkout at grocery stores and things like that, where people kept stealing from them, and they're like, oh, If we don't
Yep.
have a person there, people feel more inclined to steal.
Yes. So we are going to see that boomerang effect, next year. And I think this applies to both our companies. Like, I mean, hold on to your really good salespeople, right? Don't, get too excited about this AI. I mean, the companies
It's
next year.
every tech cycle. And that's the thing. It's
Yes.
not just AI. Anyone, because I was fortunate enough to have a dad who worked in tech before I was born. So I was kind of born into the software life.
Yeah.
And he actually worked at like Earthlink and stuff back in the 90s and Netscape and all of these companies that were at that early stage of the internet, right? And it's one of those things where you looked at the dot-com boom and bust, and the internet was a great idea. It had all the potential. The infrastructure was still being built out. It wasn't there yet. A lot of the ideas, one I remember was Webvan, where it was this delivery service that delivered like basically in refrigerated units cold groceries to people who ordered them in their city the day they ordered it from the internet. Turns out the business problem wasn't the website. It's that they didn't had to learn how to run fleets of trucks. And then the bust happened, so they couldn't get more funding. And they hadn't figured
Yes.
out how to be profitable yet. So we're going to see a ton of this. We're going to realize that the technology is there in some areas. In other areas, it's not quite servicing the need.
Yes. Yeah. So I think that's the balance. I think you have to take the disruption, lead with AI, and put the right people at the right place, because when the boomerang effect happens, the company that actually have the people, the empathy and the experience, are going to drive larger sales, deliver higher value. And I think it's still a people problem. As long as the buyers are people, the seller will be people. you know maybe one day we have AI managers buying AI consulting, and then maybe we can look at the doomsday prediction of AI. But as long as this is a people problem, consulting will always be a people focused solution. It's just that you'll need to lead with AI, and not just use AI as an accelerator, right? You'll have to put it at the front end of the experience, not on the back end.
Well, yeah. As far as that
Yeah.
goes, it's the most important place to put it because that's where there's the most unknowns, right? I
Yes.
find that people start to do really well when they know what they're up against, right? They can then confidently move forward. But that beginning phase is often the hardest part, and it's the one that can really make or break a good consulting project. So we were talking about like that, you know, even past accelerating timelines, it's the risk of a timeline becoming truncated because of a long planning cycle and discovery cycle, as well as maybe one that is of low quality. If you
Yeah.
get those two things together, you're going to have a project that extends well past its deadline, and the quality of what's delivered likely will not meet expectations that were initially there. So
100%.
AI can start to sift through all of this, frankly, much better than a person can. It has a
Yep.
limitless ability to ask questions.
Yeah. Which is, I mean, we built this product AI House, and essentially that was our vision, and that is what the product does. So we have an AI project manager infused in the heart of the tool itself, right? So it does accelerate our customers, building AI agents, and we have the process integration in it. But really what brings it together is the fact that when you log in to this tool and the product, and when you want to engage with NuVista, your first experience is an AI project manager, right? It asks you what is the problem you're trying to solve. It guides the customer in how NuVista will solve that problem. It will also collect the information. It also makes them efficient, because if there are 4 or 5 people at the customer side, the AI project manager will ensure that all those information is collected. So by the time who is an expert at solving a certain problem, looks at a customer, engagement, even if it is pre-sales, I have all of this information that AI has collected, the customer has provided, and in a guided way. It's not a form that they are using, right? If it's a migration project, the AI project manager knows what to collect, how to collect. We've also trained the AI project manager to give estimates to our customers, right? So once this is mature, our customers would essentially, like, buy consulting, engage with consulting, monitor the performance of consulting in a real-time basis. They can integrate their Slack channels into AI House, and it can give them status reports, right? So we have looked at every non-value add process that existed in consulting, right? Like, if 4 people had to get together and write a status report, while the status report is important, that 4 people working for an hour to write a status report from a customer perspective is a non-value add time, right? Because those you could, if AI could generate those, we could pass on those savings to our customers. What we are seeing at the end, it's not just the AI acceleration. Pretty much once AI house becomes the front end of how our customers buy, my prediction, and I think NuVista would be one of the first consulting companies who do it, and I feel very confident to say it in your podcast, that we will actually move to a per minute consulting billing. When
Yeah.
we did that in cloud, everybody, when Amazon said, per minute EC2 billing, and then they went to per second billing, it was very disruptive. And I think what we're going to see with AI-led consulting is that we actually move to our ability to bill our customers per minute and per seconds. And those result in 20-30% savings, just those cents and dollars that get saved when you start and stop a clock, right? That's what I think is the true impact to customers, which is how that higher value gets delivered. And in an essence, my consulting becomes more efficient. One developer can do 5 projects at a time. I don't need to bill my customers 40 hours a week, because before I did have the ability to have one consultant work on 5 projects without overhead. So if AI manages that overhead, I can pass on that saving. And like I said, I think we will be moving to per minute, per second billing very soon.
Well, I think it's going to be important with AI because, again, some of those, like we were talking about earlier with the internet age, there's all these costs that start to show up in new technologies, right? And AI is not necessarily a cheap technology. It uses a lot of GPUs, and you have to learn really how to run a good infrastructure operation to efficiently deliver to AI to people. And I think a lot of companies are going to figure that learning curve out as they start to build their first AI products, because
Yes.
it's a huge, that's a big hurdle, right? Infrastructure wise, it's very different from maybe applications you've done traditionally in the past. So
Yes.
I think some things like that also benefit from when it's per minute, per second. You're able to really kind of put constraints on the AI being used and ensure that, hey, it puts out great output, but I don't want to run this GPU for hours. I want to turn it off, right?
Yes. And
So
I Yeah, and I think that's the unknown of AI. I mean, we last year wrote, all this code, we call it the RAG, that basically powers and customizes the Gen AI models that are out there. We had to throw all of that away and move to a newer architecture called MCP, right? There's just so much innovation that you're right. Like today, it is very expensive, but we don't know where it will be in the future, right? We don't know how cheap or expensive it will become
well,
to
and the
customize the
value,
model.
the value is always a question of cost versus reward, right? So if the reward outweighs the cost,
Yeah,
that's great. Because again, what maybe took hours of consulting, which is also expensive, now takes 30 minutes of time with an AI. That might be less expensive when you actually boil down the numbers. So like you said, you get to pass those savings on to customers. They now also have the results that they want, the outcomes, in 30 minutes maybe, as opposed to
yeah,
hours and hours, or maybe like, hey, I'll get this to you tomorrow, because
yeah.
that's how it works out sometimes.
And that is where, a lot of people will ask me about, like, where they should be investing. And I think some of these problems that you talk about are hard problems, right? And I think the big companies like Amazon, Meta, and others are going to solve, and you kind of wait for them to solve it. Like I wouldn't, today, unless you have the open AI, type, like investments coming your way. I would just wait for some of these hard problems to be solved by larger companies, which is why we partnered with Amazon. You guys too, right?
Yep.
We are. I mean, Amazon is accelerating and writing an AI agent that develops code, right? And they are solving that hard problem of making it cost efficient, right? What we want to focus on, and at least from a NuVista perspective, is how do we build the process around it, right? So Amazon can focus on writing efficient code. NuVista can focus on writing efficient data lake code, right? That's the process
Yeah, it's
optimization we can bring in.
it's everyone focusing on what their customer needs, right? So NVIDIA says our customers need the best GPUs on earth. Whether you're a gamer or an AI person, you need the best GPUs that exist. So that's what they focus on. Then when those customers get it, whether you're making video games or AI, then Amazon is working on all these different models and softwares that you can build on top of and things like that that can deliver AI for, like you said, the hard problems. And then you get to the other customers who, again, maybe use what they've done to deliver something else. And this has been how technology's always worked, right? There have been all these different components along the way leading to finished products. I think for
And
small companies to be competitive is instead of, I mean, if you have a big problem you think you can solve, and you think you have a path there, by all means, be ambitious. But sometimes it's the overlooked problems.
yes,
Find a problem that no one's solving.
yes,
Start
and
there.
which is where, yep. And I think this is where I think one of the disruption, and I think I've been kind of saying some of my future predictions here. We'll see how much of this materializes, right? But if you look at the AI disruption, and if you look at the startup community, you see these Silicon Valley startups, out of school graduates, just technology savant, creating like $1 billion companies, right? I think what AI is going to do is also disrupt and put that pressure where midlife entrepreneurs who have the experience and understanding of a process, understanding of that problem, actually be the next startup founders of these multi-billion dollar value, right? Will I bet on these technology savants to solve a financial services problem, or a chief investment officer who left their job at 45 to start an AI company to solve a financial services problem? Because AI is so disruptive and making technology commodity that I think the disruption of having these midlife entrepreneurs be the future startup founders. And I think you're seeing some of those predictions, that you would see a single employee $1 billion company. I don't know whether that is possible or not, right? But that's actually more likely, and that's a disruption that I'm kind of seeing, and see if that becomes material, is whether we are able to kind of, AI is able to bring that value to the process owners and the information owners, right? Who have the experience, right? Where traditionally, most of Silicon Valleys have been very hardworking, tech experts. And I think that collaboration is going to drive the future companies. And I'm kind of seeing, whether the technology being commodity disrupts that too. But I'm a midlife entrepreneur myself, right? Love AI. I think I can do a lot more and drive more value with less people. So I definitely believe that more people with my experience and my age would become startup founders.
I
Finally
think
be
more
able to take
people
that risk.
overall will, as long as they can understand to utilize these AI tools for maybe some of the areas that they are less comfortable in. Because, like, if you really think about a lot of people who maybe are, whether you're a midlife entrepreneur, a young entrepreneur, there maybe are some elements that you are less just experienced with, right? And to be able to fill those gaps, it could mean everything for you actually starting a holistic, functional business. And I think this really happened a lot with some of the Silicon Valley founders of the cloud age, right? When the cloud started taking over, where instead of having to really found a company with funding to build a data center and do this, you could toy with an idea in the cloud and come up with something good like Instagram, where with 13 people were there when the company got bought out for over $1 billion, and they built this thing in a cloud native kind of fashion so that they never had to have these huge personnel to set up infrastructure and have a data center and the property of that. And they were able to just completely sideskip that. And it's
Yep.
because they wanted to build a photo sharing app. They didn't want to run a big building full of servers.
Yes.
So AI is going to
And
be another, I think, a natural evolution to that process.
yes, and we'll see a lot of, traditionally, the risk averse, the midlife entrepreneurs, in their nice, enterprise job, didn't feel the confidence or couldn't raise the money needed to launch a traditional startup. I think with AI, we'll see a lot, and I think the industry will benefit from it. I would love, people who have like tremendous amount of supply chain experience actually create the next AI for supply chain, right? Versus, I would love the Silicon Valley also to compete with them, but I would bet somebody who has that knowledge and that experience, and now with AI can actually, launch that product without requiring tremendous amount of engineering talent, that was required and was a cost inhibitor for a startup like that, right?
I think it'll be for the best of like all these companies and customers. Like I don't know if you've ever heard this from like mechanics and automotive engineers, like the tumultuous relationship between the two, where mechanics look at how this car was put together and they said, why did you engineer it like this? It is so hard to work on. And the engineer says, I engineered it like this because it's good for all these reasons. I didn't think at all about you working on it. It was not my concern.
Yes.
And so imagine a mechanic can now say, I don't like how this was set up in a car. I'm going to use AI to say what I don't like. And I'm going to have it implement engineering expertise to make a easier to service part for my car.
Yes.
I mean,
that's
goodness.
a great example. Yeah, it's a great example. And I think that is how I think AI should, which is why the optimism that I have about AI's impact to the industry, it should result in people who can actually deliver the value to the customers, be able to launch their startups and create that impact to the community, right? I mean, I was having lunch the other day with a person who deals with contracts all the time, right? And we were just having this AI conversation, and he said, maybe I should build an AI agent that can go to a company and look at all their contracts and find them 20-30% efficiency, right? And I mean, that's I think today with AI, I feel that he can do that, and be fairly successful and not require a lot of that startup cost that you would need. Like imagine like an intelligent document processor that we were building 4 or 5 years ago with OCRs and machine learning capability. Like today, every time I tell somebody that I'm working on this problem, they say, oh, ChatGPT can do it. And I'm like, sure. I'm happy that ChatGPT is able to do something, because it actually is bringing more buyers of consulting to us, because they quickly realize that while ChatGPT can do something, it cannot solve their enterprise problem. And that actually...
There's a difference between information and information in context, right? Like, just because you have the data doesn't mean you know what to do with it. Like, I took calculus in college, but if you put a calculus book in front of me right now, I'm going to have to brush up from page 1.
Yes. Yeah.
It'd be doing it all over again. So, yeah, I think that's where AI provides a lot of exciting opportunity, but it doesn't change your own experience, which is, again, like we've talked about a bit for the last conversation. Utilizing your experience and then leveraging AI could be huge, but AI is not going to change your experience. It's not going to make you experience in something that you're not. So I think that learning the distinction will also be really important for business owners.
Yep, 100%. Which is why I think I mentioned in the beginning, it's if everybody's prediction is that AI is going to disrupt consulting in a way where it is where it's going to be less valuable, I believe it's going to be more valuable, because and it's going to result in higher consulting rates. It's going to result in more agility and more value. In fact, in consulting, we always had this thing where should you go buy an off-the-shelf product or you should build your own, right?
Yep.
And if today, I mean, if somebody wants a CRM product, I would not build it for the customer. I'll be like, just go buy Salesforce or any other off-the-shelf CRM product, right?
There's just so many at this point.
Yes, and I think now, with AI, that's a perfect example of that disruption, right? Because even if something like Salesforce, most companies spend 3 to 6 months in implementing and configuring that Salesforce to their process. AI, is like it's a perfect example of how AI will deliver higher value, that most customers will actually look at the buy versus build decision and actually decide to build, because it would be either equal cost or cheaper to actually build a customized CRM than take an off-the-shelf CRM and customize it, right? And we see that pressure on the SaaS side, right? Where you have 10 years of IP that AI can build in 6 months. So how do you monetize that IP, right? Before you could monetize that IP, because it would take somebody 10 years to build what you have in your application. If AI can build that in 6 months, like how do you monetize that IP? So the only thing that is left to monetize is the process and the intelligence and the human empathy, the human judgment. Yeah, the problem solving, right? So it's like now you kind of like, this is my reason why I'm saying that the rates of consultants will go up, because it's not the technology that is valuable. It is the judgment, the empathy, and the experience and their ability to make the right decision using those technologies. So we should see consulting actually be more valuable. I think it's a very exciting time to take the AI disruptor and be the disruptee rather than get disrupted.
Yeah. No, I think consulting is going to be an industry that's very interesting. I think we're going to see a lot of changes, whether you're a big consulting firm, small consulting firm, and the changes aren't going to be the same between each of those. Time will be the one that tells. So we'll see in the next 2 to 4 years, I'd say, how this is really starting to shake out. But like you, I'm fairly optimistic. I work in this business like yourself, and as much as I can see some areas where it's like, okay, this is going to encroach on some things I've done in the past, it's not necessarily encroaching on the areas where I think people shine. I think it's encroaching on some of the busier areas, some of the areas that take a lot of time, and inevitably cost the customers money. So as far as it goes, I'm excited.
Yep, it is. And, there is, it just, AI, if I have to kind of like, summarize, what AI doing today is, there's always, non-value add process in everything that we do, right? AI is putting focus on that, right? So I think that's where the prediction comes from, that, it's addressing the non-value add process in everything that has happened. But like I said, once the AI disruption is settled in, we should actually see the benefit of companies hiring more companies being created, the demand for consulting going up, demand generally for every experience, marketing to event to salespeople. It should all drive to a higher number. It's just that companies will become more agile, right? But we should see a lot more out there. So look at NuVista, for example. We are a small agile consulting company. In a traditional age, we probably wouldn't exist. We exist today because of AI, right? And what we're able to do using AI for our customers. Otherwise, it would be very difficult for us to compete in a traditional sense because of the amount of time it would take to bootstrap a consulting company, such as what we do from a value perspective. Right.
And to create IP that goes with that consulting. You built your AI house tool along with actually delivering consulting to customers. And when you put those things together, starting a company and building out tools, that's an expense. That's usually where you need funding at that point. So as far as it goes, it's going to be a huge opportunity for a lot of people.
Yeah, and we grew by 10% from people perspective this year, but I mean, our next year projection is to grow our people count by 20-25%, right? So I mean, I think, again, we are small, so those percentages look bigger. But I think larger companies should also have the similar trend, that their headcount should start growing in a few years once these AI efficiencies are settled in.
Yeah, I think especially companies that maybe were struggling to compete from a people standpoint with a lot of these other resource rich companies that were out there. So it's going to be a new age of startups. It's exciting. Well, as far as it goes, again, this is Bimal Tandel from NuVista AI. I'm so happy you came to join us on the podcast. Everyone, go check out his company, NuVista AI. You can check out their AI House product. And otherwise, always check in with ReluTech for future podcasts. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much.